Good evening and welcome to your bedtime story. Tonight I'm going to read from the story The Search for Delicious by Natalie Babbitt. And on the back of the book it says, "What is the definition of delicious? The king's all for apples, the queen favors Christmas pudding, and soon the entry in the Prime Minister's dictionary is a bone of contention throughout the court. Alarmed, the king dispatches young Gaylen to take a poll of the whole kingdom. In short order, the country is on the brink of civil war." So it's a kind of a fantasy adventure, and after I read an excerpt from the book, I will share with you something that I find delicious, and I'll show you how to make it too. It was noon when Gaylen rode into the first town. The streets were noisy with people going about their usual business, but when they saw Gaylen in the royal draperies on the horse, they left what they were doing and followed along behind him in a buzz of curiosity. Gaylen rode straight to the square in the center of town and cried out, as he had been told to do, gather round, I'm here on the king's business." In no time at all, the entire population of the town had crowded into the square, and the mayor himself was elbowing his way through to where Gaylen sat on his horse. There was a considerable racket, what with everyone shoving and laughing, but the mayor climbed up on the wall that stood there and raised his hand. "This uproar is downright disgraceful," he bellowed. "Everyone be quiet or you'll all go to jail." In the hush that followed, Gaylen read the proclamation in a loud, clear voice. "Let it be known that every single creature in my kingdom who is capable of speech shall register with my messenger the following information: name, age, home, and the food he or she honestly believes to be the most delicious of all foods." Gaylen rolled up the proclamation and added, "Now if you all just form into a long line, we'll go on with the listing." And he took the large notebook and his pen and ink out of the saddlebag. The people began happily jostling one another into a sort of line. Since there were nearly 200 present, counting the children, there was a great deal of confusion. But this was not the worst of it, for, of course, the people got to discussing the proclamation, and it wasn't 2 minutes before they began arguing. Gaylen had barely registered 3 names when a scuffle broke out somewhere in the middle of the line, a scuffle which rapidly became a fist fight which immediately developed into a general free-for-all. The whole square had suddenly become one big grappling mass of people, all throwing things and punching one another, and falling down and tearing one another's clothes and yelling things like "melons" and "pork" and "raisin cake." The mayor, who was still standing on the well beside Gaylen and the horse, tried to salvage a shred of order, but his yells only added to the general din. At last he climbed up behind Gaylen and shouted into his ear, "Come on, I'll have to call out the guard." Marrow carried them off through the square, dodging flying vegetables and trying not to step on anybody. They stopped on a side street before a little building where a sign said "Mayor" in large letters. "Just a minute while I call out the guard," said the mayor, and he drew a deep breath. Then he bellowed at the top of his lungs, "Guard! I say guard!" In response to this ear-splitting summons, a soldier in a battered leather jerkin and helmet appeared at the door. He carried a long spear, around the point of which had been tied a small pillow. "What's the pillow for?" asked Gaylen. "Well, we don't want to hurt anyone, you know," said the mayor. "Now then, go up there and calm everybody down," he said to the soldier, "and tell them all to come in here one by one. Tell them it's the king's command." The soldier trudged off, and the mayor took Gaylen into his office. "It makes me feel a whole lot better having a guard to call out at a time like this," he said, sinking into his chair behind a large table. "But it's most upsetting, to say the least. What on earth does the king want to go and stir up a lot of trouble for?" "Well, you see," said Gaylen, "the Prime Minister is writing a dictionary, and he's having a hard time with a definition for delicious. That's all it is. I can't see why everyone gets so excited about it." "Oh, people enjoy getting excited, you know," said the mayor. "But just the same, it's different this time. There's something in the air. I had a report this morning that there's a fellow writing about talking against the king. I hope he doesn't try to come here. By George, I do. It's possible that, on the whole, part of it could be an overall undercurrent of dissatisfaction. If the king lies down on the job, The people will stand to gain a loss of confidence in him. Mark my words, in the end it will be the beginning of trouble." And he sighed and gazed out the window. Gaylen thought he understood what the mayor was trying to say. His thoughts turned to the brawling people in the square beyond, whose shouts and cries could still be heard, and he was reminded suddenly of the walnut in the king's apple. The morning's holiday mood was gone, and in its place was a vague uneasiness, like the feeling you get when you run down the road to overtake a friend and find, when he turns to meet you, that it isn't a friend at all, but a stranger. It was 3 days before everyone in the town had been registered, and when the job was finished, Gaylen turned over the pages of the notebook and sighed. If the poll continued like this, he said to himself, the Prime Minister would have to leave out Delicious whether he would or no, for so far no 2 votes agreed, and some of them were very complicated. The only mention of apples, for instance, came in the form of a vote for apple tarts, but apple tarts baked with nutmeg, not cinnamon, and even then really delicious only when served with sharp yellow cheese. You couldn't put a definition like that into a dictionary. He put the notebook away in his saddlebag and crossed from the office to the mayor's house, where for the last time he would spend the night. He was glad to be finished with polling the town, but the evenings had been fine, for the mayor had a little daughter named Medley, and every night he told her stories. Gaylen had sat 2 evenings, his eyes as wide as Medley's, while the mayor wove tales of wise fish and Neros, elusive white roebucks and castles of the dead, long and remarkable tales that left you breathless. But he tried not to let the mayor see how eagerly he listened. After all, he was nearly grown. Still, stories like these were never heard in the castle unless a passing minstrel stopped to sing. He loved them, marveled at them, half believed them, and wanted to believe them altogether. "What shall it be tonight, Medley?" asked the mayor that evening after supper. "Dwarfs? Or mermaids?" "Please, Papa," she said, climbing up beside him, "tell us a story about the woldweller." "Us?" "Yes, Gaylen and me. He likes the stories too." "What's a woldweller?" asked Gaylen quickly, frowning at Medley and hoping the mayor wouldn't make a pointed remark. "Dear me," said the mayor, "a great boy like you and you don't know about woldwellers? Well then, a woldweller, so the legend goes, is a creature who lives all alone up in a tree in the forest, a little inmate of the great outdoors, you might say. He is very, very old and very, very wise, and he answers questions. You have to get lost, they say, to find him. You creep along through the overhanging underbrush. Somehow, he knows you're coming to see him. And sure enough, you're going to see him, for suddenly, bam, there he is. You ask, he answers. Downright uplifting." Medley clapped her hands. "Will you go and ask him what he picks for Delicious?" she said to Gaylen. "That's a good idea," said the mayor, chuckling. "The king did tell me I was to ask everybody," said Gaylen. "Do you think I could find him, Medley?" "Oh yes, it's easy," she said eagerly. "I found him all by myself last summer, and I wasn't even looking for him." "Here there, Medley, you mustn't tell stories," said the mayor, still chuckling. "But I did, Papa," she insisted. "That day when we were playing hide and seek and I went too far into the forest. Don't you remember? I saw the woldweller while I was lost. He had a rabbit tied to his belt and he was climbing up a tree." The mayor stopped chuckling. "Medley," he said severely, "you know very well that a woldweller is just something in a story. Nobody lives for hundreds of years up in a tree. We'll have to stop telling fairy tales if you're going to start believing them." And he sent her off to bed. "Children get ideas into their heads sometimes," said the mayor when Medley was gone. He lit his pipe and settled back in his chair. "Of course, you're only a child yourself, really." "Oh no," Gaylen protested. "I'm 12 years old." "Oh," said the mayor. He puffed away at his pipe and then he said, "There was a time, I understand, when people really believed in things like woldwellers and dwarves and the rest. Very little insight in their outlook. But of course we're much too advanced for that sort of things these days. We've overcome the underlying superstitions." And he blew a smoke ring and looked very pleased with himself. So something that I discovered I enjoy eating and I find quite delicious is basically just flavored yogurt. But it's my own flavoring. I use just plain whole milk yogurt, and I add, got a bowl here. So yeah. Start with some yogurt, just plain yogurt. Which tastes pretty good on its own, but it's not sweet. So I add first a little bit of honey. I'm gonna focus on that. It's not gonna show it to you, is it? It says Hawaiian Rainbow Bees Rainbow Blossom. So just add a little honey, stir it up. That sweetens it up pretty well, but for a little extra flavor, I just add ordinary Concord grape spread. This is Welch's natural, 100% North American grown, and no high fructose corn syrup. And so it's made with just regular sugar, not cane sugar. I'm getting low on it. You don't need too much either, just a scoop will do. That. Mix all that together. And you end up with something that looks like that. And it tastes pretty good too. I hope you enjoyed your bedtime story. Get some sleep out there, and I'll see you next week. Happy dreams.